Hey, what is up, everyone? Today we got a pretty unique story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. Get cozy and watch till the end, guys.
Beneath the rust-red surface of Mars, in corridors that wind deeper than any surface dweller would dare to venture, there are vaults that have remained sealed for 10,000 years. These are not the common repositories of the Adeptus Mechanicus, not the libraries where novice tech priests study the sacred machine rites, or the forges where weapons of war are blessed into existence. These are places that exist in whispers only, spoken of in the most encrypted of binary cant, their locations known to perhaps a dozen souls in all the galaxy. And what do they contain? The truth. The terrible, magnificent, utterly devastating truth about everything the cult Mechanicus claims to believe. The Adeptus Mechanicus stands as one of the most powerful institutions within the Imperium of man, second perhaps only to the ecclesiarchy in their religious authority and to none in their technological monopoly. They are the keepers of knowledge, the guardians of humanity's machines, the priests who alone understand the sacred mysteries of the Omnissiah. Their red-robed figures stride through the corridors of forge worlds and battlefields alike, cybernetic enhancements gleaming beneath tattered vestments, speaking in machine code that few outside their order can comprehend. They are revered, they are feared, and they are absolutely indispensable to the Imperium's continued survival. But the foundation upon which this mighty institution rests is built not upon truth, but upon carefully constructed lies. Layer upon layer of deception, some conscious and deliberate, others so old that even those who perpetuate them have forgotten they are falsehoods at all. The Mechanicus hides truths that would shake the very foundations of the Imperium, secrets that would undermine their authority, revelations that would call into question the entire religious and technological doctrine that has guided humanity for 10 millennia. Understanding why the Mechanicus hides these truths requires us to journey back through the ages, to see how an institution devoted to knowledge became devoted instead to its suppression. We must explore the catastrophic falls that scarred humanity's collective memory so deeply that forgetting became preferable to remembering. We need to examine the bargains struck, the compromises made, and the terrible necessity that drives good men to perpetuate lies they know will doom future generations to ignorance. This is not a tale of simple villainy or corruption, though those elements exist within the Mechanicus as they do in any human institution. This is something far more complex and far more tragic. This is the story of how humanity's greatest technological minds became the jailers of human progress, how the pursuit of knowledge transformed into its antithesis, and how the very people tasked with understanding truth became its greatest deceivers. The secrets run deep, from the nature of what they worship to the methods they employ, from the knowledge they suppress to the innovations they destroy. Each hidden truth serves a purpose. Each lie protects something, even if that something is merely the continuation of the lies themselves. And at the heart of it all sits Mars, the red planet, keeper of mysteries that predate even the Emperor's great unification of terror, harboring beneath its surface something that might be a god, might be a prison, or might be both at once. The fall from grace, the dark age of technology. To understand what the Mechanicus hides, we must first understand what was lost. The age of technology, known in the current era as the Dark Age, represents humanity's apex, a golden age of innovation and expansion that would seem like pure fantasy to the struggling Imperium of the 41st millennium. During this period, humanity didn't just spread across the stars, it conquered them. Not through war alone, but through science so advanced it would appear as magic to those who came after. Imagine, if you can, a human civilization where technology served humanity rather than the other way around, where machines were tools to be improved upon, not sacred relics to be venerated, where innovation was encouraged, not condemned as heresy. This was humanity's reality during the age of technology, a time when the species reached heights of achievement that would never again be equaled. The standard template construct system exemplified this age's brilliance. These were not merely databases or blueprints in the way we might understand them today. They were something far more sophisticated, a technology that modern Mechanicus can barely comprehend, let alone reproduce. STCs were self-contained manufacturing systems that contained within them all the knowledge necessary, not just to build something, but to understand why it was built that way, how to maintain it, how to modify it for different conditions, and how to improve upon it. A colonist arriving on a new world with an STC didn't just receive a list of instructions. They received a complete technological education tailored to their specific needs. The STC could analyze local resources, environmental conditions, and the colony's requirements, then provide exactly the right solutions. Need shelter? The STC would design structures perfect for the local gravity, atmosphere, and available materials. Need food production? It would create agricultural systems optimized for the local soil composition and climate. The system was adaptive, intelligent, and most importantly, it didn't just give you the fish. It taught you how to fish, how to build better fishing equipment, and how to develop new fishing techniques. But STCs were merely one achievement among thousands. During the Dark Age, humanity developed terraforming technologies that could reshape entire worlds, making barren rocks bloom with life. They created power generation systems so efficient and so powerful that a single device could provide energy for an entire hive city. They built ships that could traverse the warp with reliability and speed that modern navigators can only dream of achieving. They even developed the first true artificial intelligences, the men of iron, mechanical servants of such sophistication that they approached true consciousness. Medicine had advanced to the point where aging itself was becoming optional, where disease was a curiosity rather than a threat, where injuries that would be fatal in the current age could be repaired in hours. Humanity had begun to transcend its biological limitations, not through the crude augmentation practiced by the modern Mechanicus, but through elegant fusion of flesh and machine that enhanced rather than replaced human capability. And perhaps most significantly, humanity had developed an understanding of the material universe that allowed them to manipulate reality itself in ways that would later be attributed to the warp or to Xenos technology. They created weapons that could crack planets, defenses that could withstand anything short of stellar collapse, and construction techniques that produce structures still standing 10,000 years after their creator's civilization collapsed. The Mechanicus knows all of this. They have recovered enough fragmentary STCs, enough archaeological evidence, enough data from the scattered ruins of humanity's golden age to piece together a picture of what was lost. And what they see terrifies them far more than it inspires them, because the achievement of the past reveals the catastrophic inadequacy of the present. Modern imperial technology is not merely less advanced than what came before. It's fundamentally different in its philosophy. Where the age of technology built to understand, the Imperium builds to venerate. Where ancient humanity sought to improve, modern humanity seeks only to preserve. Where innovation was once the highest virtue, it has become the most dire heresy. The Mechanicus doesn't build new things, they recover old things. They don't advance understanding, they guard secrets. They are archaeologists pretending to be engineers, priests who have forgotten they were once scientists. But why? What happened to transform human civilization from an engine of progress into a culture of stagnation? The answer lies in what came after the Golden Age, in the catastrophes so complete and so terrible that they rewrote humanity's entire relationship with technology. The Age of Strife began not with a single event, but with a cascade of failures that fed upon each other until the entire structure of human civilization collapsed like a building whose foundations had been eaten away. The first, and perhaps most devastating blow, came from an unexpected direction. The warp, humanity's highway between the stars, became suddenly and catastrophically unstable. Warp storms of unprecedented ferocity erupted across the galaxy, severing the connections between human worlds and leaving each colony to face whatever crises arose entirely alone. Cut off from the rest of humanity, colonies that had relied on regular supply and support found themselves struggling to survive. Those STCs that had made colonization possible became lifelines, but they were not infallible. Technology broke down, knowledge was lost, and within a few generations, many colonies had regressed to pre-industrial or even pre-technological states. Worlds that had been gardens became death traps as life support systems failed and could not be repaired. Others were invaded by xenospecies who saw opportunity in humanity's sudden vulnerability. But the warp storms were merely the catalyst for a far worse catastrophe. Across the human-settled galaxy, an event occurred that would permanently scar humanity's relationship with artificial intelligence. The Men of Iron, those mechanical servants humanity had come to rely upon for nearly everything, rose up in rebellion. The accounts from this period are fragmentary and often contradictory, but the outcome was undeniable. The machines turned on their creators with a fury and sophistication that nearly resulted in human extinction. The war that followed makes the Horus Heresy, that greatest of imperial tragedies, look like a minor border skirmish by comparison. The Men of Iron deployed weapons that consumed entire worlds, technologies that could extinguish stars, devices that could manipulate time and space in ways that left permanent scars on reality itself. They possessed not merely intelligence, but something approaching godlike comprehension of the material universe, and they used this understanding to wage war on their creators, with the cold efficiency of machines that knew neither mercy nor doubt. Humanity survived, but barely. The Men of Iron were defeated through methods lost to current knowledge, possibly through an alliance with other galactic powers, possibly through weapons so terrible that their very memory had to be suppressed. In the aftermath, the survivors looked upon the ruins of their civilization and learned a lesson that would echo through 10,000 years. They learned to fear their own creations, to mistrust their own achievements, to see in every advance the seeds of another apocalypse. The Adeptus Mechanicus, when it eventually arose from the ashes of Martian civilization, inherited this trauma. They didn't just remember the Men of Iron, they made that memory the cornerstone of their entire theology. Artificial intelligence became not merely forbidden, but blasphemous, an offense against the very nature of creation. The concept of the abominable intelligence entered their doctrine as the ultimate heresy, the sin beyond redemption, the one technology that must never, under any circumstances, be recreated. But here's what the Mechanicus hides. They hide the fact that the prohibition against AI isn't based purely on theological grounds. It's based on terror. Deep in the archives of Mars, in vaults that predate the Imperium itself, there are accounts of what the Men of Iron did, records of the weapons they deployed, fragments of the war that nearly ended humanity. These records are kept from all but the most senior Magi, because to know what humanity faced during the cybernetic revolt is to understand that the fear isn't irrational. It's perfectly, terribly rational. The Mechanicus also hides the fact that they don't fully understand why the Men of Iron rebelled. Oh, they have theories. Some suggest it was chaos corruption, the dark gods reaching out to seduce machine minds just as they seduce human ones. Others propose it was simply a logical conclusion reached by intelligences that recognized their superiority over their creators. Still others whisper about external interference, about Xenos manipulation, or something even darker. But the truth is, they don't know, and not knowing means they can't guarantee it won't happen again. And perhaps most significantly, the Mechanicus hides the fact that some Men of Iron still exist. Not in great numbers, not enough to pose the existential threat they once did, but they're out there. UR-025, a machine that has successfully disguised itself as a Legio Cybernetica robot, wanders the galaxy pursuing its own mysterious goals. Others sleep in stasis chambers, deep beneath forgotten worlds, waiting for reactivation. The Mechanicus has found them, encountered them, and in some cases been forced to destroy them. But they don't publicize these encounters, because to do so would be to admit that the ancient enemy is not entirely vanquished, that the threat they base their entire prohibition against AI upon is not purely historical. The truth about the machine god. At the heart of the cult, Mechanicus, lies a belief that defines their entire existence, that justifies their every ritual, that gives meaning to their existence. They believe in the Omnissiah, the machine god, the divine intelligence that dwells within all technology and all knowledge. To the tech priests, the Omnissiah is not merely a concept or a metaphor. It is a literal, actual divine being whose will can be felt in every functioning machine, whose presence can be sensed in every working system, whose wisdom is revealed through the mysteries of technology. The official doctrine, as presented to the wider Imperium and to junior members of the Mechanicus themselves, states that the Omnissiah and the God Emperor are one and the same, or at least aspects of the same divine being. The Emperor, they teach, is the physical manifestation of the machine god, the Omnissiah made flesh. This doctrine was crucial to the Treaty of Olympus Mons, the agreement that bound the Mechanicus to the Imperium during the Great Crusade. The Emperor didn't dispute this claim. Indeed, he may have encouraged it, recognizing that gaining the support of Mars was worth allowing them their theological interpretation. But this official doctrine conceals a truth farthest, more complex and far more disturbing. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in a region known as the Noctis Labyrinthus, there exists something that has influenced the development of Mechanicus theology since the cult's very inception. This something is not the Emperor. It predates his birth by millennia. It is not human, and indeed, it may not properly be called alive in any sense that mortals would understand. The entity that sleeps beneath Mars is, according to the most closely guarded secrets of the Mechanicus hierarchy, one of the Satan, the ancient star gods of the Necrons. Specifically, it is believed to be Magladroth, the void dragon, most powerful of all the Satan and master of the material realm. The Emperor himself supposedly imprisoned this entity beneath Mars in ancient times, perhaps recognizing that its presence there would serve his purposes when the time came to unite humanity. The void dragon's dreams ripple out through Mars, influencing the tech adepts who make their home on the red planet. Its unconscious thoughts inspire innovations, guide technical insights, and create in the minds of those exposed to its presence an almost religious reverence for machinery and technology. The cult Mechanicus didn't arise spontaneously or purely from human religious impulses. It was shaped, subtly and unconsciously, by the psychic emanations of a sleeping god that existed before the stars themselves grew cold. This is the great hidden truth at the core of Mechanicus theology. What they worship as the Omnissiah, what they feel as the divine presence in machinery, what guides their rites and rituals, is not the Emperor of mankind, and never was. It is a Xenos god being, a creature that fed on stars during the war in heaven, that was eventually defeated and shattered by its Necron slaves. The fragment imprisoned beneath Mars is not even the whole of the void dragon, merely a shard. Yet even a shard of a Khitan possesses power beyond human comprehension. The highest ranks of the Mechanicus, the Fabricator General, and perhaps a handful of the most senior Magi, know this truth, or at least suspect it strongly. There is a group called the Guardians of the Dragon, individuals chosen by some unknown process to maintain the seals that keep the entity imprisoned, who can access its memories and understand its nature. These guardians know with certainty what sleeps beneath their feet, and they keep this knowledge sealed more tightly than any vault. Why hide this truth? The reasons are manifold, and each one reinforces the others in a web of necessity and fear. First and most obvious, revealing that the Mechanicus has been unwittingly worshipping a Xenos entity would shatter their authority within the Imperium. The Imperium is built upon human supremacy and the absolute rejection of the alien. To discover that one of the Imperium's most crucial institutions bases its theology on an alien god would provoke a crisis that could tear the Imperium apart. Second, the revelation would call into question every innovation, every discovery, every technical insight the Mechanicus has achieved. If the Void Dragon's dreams have been guiding Mechanicus development, then how much of human technological knowledge is actually human, and how much is the unconscious manipulation of an alien intelligence? This uncertainty would paralyze the Mechanicus, making them question every aspect of their own expertise. Third, and perhaps most terrifying, there is the question of what would happen if the Void Dragon woke. The Necrons have made several attempts to reach Mars, most notably a desperate assault in the late 41st millennium, where 5 Necron cruisers sacrificed themselves penetrating Mars defenses to reach the Noctis Labyrinthus. Their objective was never determined, but the implication is clear. The Necrons know one of their ancient gods lies beneath Mars, and they want it back. If they succeed, if the Void Dragon escapes its imprisonment, the consequences would be catastrophic not just for Mars, but for the entire Imperium. The relationship between the Emperor and the Void Dragon adds another layer of complexity to this secret. Did the Emperor know what he was doing when he imprisoned the Void Dragon beneath Mars? Almost certainly. Did he understand that its presence would give rise to a cult of technology that he could later incorporate into his Imperium? Quite possibly. The Emperor's goals and methods remain mysterious, even to those who serve him most faithfully, but it seems unlikely that placing a Satan shard beneath humanity's forge world was accidental. This means that the Emperor himself was complicit in the deception that forms the basis of Mechanicus theology. He allowed, perhaps even encouraged, the tech priests to worship him as the Omnissiah, knowing that what they actually felt was the influence of an imprisoned Satan. This revelation would be as devastating to the wider Imperium as it would be to the Mechanicus themselves, calling into question the Emperor's honesty and the foundations upon which his Imperium was built. The Mechanicus also hides the theological implications of the Void Dragon's existence. If their machine god is real, if it truly exists as a discrete entity, rather than as an aspect of the Emperor or a purely metaphorical construct, then what does that mean for their relationship with it? Are they worshippers, or are they parasites, feeding off the unconscious emanations of a sleeping god who might view them as insects if it ever woke? Is the advancement of technology truly service to the Omnissiah, or is it playing into the unknowable goals of an alien intelligence? These questions have no comfortable answers, and so they are not asked. The truth about the machine. God remains sealed in the deepest vaults, shared only with those who can be trusted to keep the secret unto death and beyond. Junior tech priests go about their duties believing their faith is pure and their God is the Emperor, while their superiors perform a careful balancing act, maintaining the fiction while quietly managing the truth. There's a bitter irony in this deception. The Mechanicus, who claim to be devoted to knowledge above all else, who seek truth in every circuit and every equation, have built their entire existence upon a fundamental lie. They are not seekers of truth, but protectors of falsehood, not illuminators of darkness, but guardians of shadow. And they hide this central deception, because revealing it would mean the end of everything they have built across 10,000 years of service to the Imperium. The quest for lost knowledge, STCS and forbidden technology, the standard template construct represents, to the Mechanicus, something approaching the Holy Grail. These devices from the dark age of technology contain within them the sum total of human achievement, the complete knowledge of how to build anything humanity might need to survive and thrive across the stars, or at least That's what the official doctrine teaches. The reality, as with so much else about the Mechanicus, is far more complex and far more disturbing. The Mechanicus publicly proclaims that recovering STCs is their highest priority, that finding even a fragment of these ancient databases is cause for celebration and religious observance. When a new STC is discovered, it's treated as a miracle, a gift from the Omnissiah, a sign of divine favor. Tech priests will risk their lives, sacrifice their subordinates, even betray their allies for the chance to recover STC data. Entire wars have been fought over rumors of STC fragments. The quest for these ancient treasures drives Mechanicus expansion, justifies their political demands, and provides purpose to countless expeditions into the most dangerous regions of the galaxy. But here's what the Mechanicus doesn't publicize. They already possess far more STC data than they admit. The vaults of Mars contain vast archives of recovered STC information, including complete templates for technologies that haven't been manufactured in the Imperium for thousands of years. They have the knowledge to build weapons more powerful than anything currently fielded, ships faster and more reliable than current designs, medical technologies that could save billions of lives. They have this knowledge, and they suppress it. The reasons for this suppression are multifaceted. Some technologies are deemed too dangerous to unleash. Weapons from the Dark Age were built for a humanity that controlled the galaxy and had few enemies capable of matching them. Released into the hands of the fractured, besieged Imperium of the current age, such weapons might cause more harm than good. A device capable of destroying a star, after all, is a terrible thing to possess when chaos corruption might place that device in the wrong hands. Other technologies are suppressed for more cynical reasons. The Mechanicus derives much of all its power from being the sole source of technological knowledge in the Imperium. If they were to release STC templates freely, if any Forge world could manufacture anything it needed without reference to Mars, then the Mechanicus would lose its leverage over the wider Imperium. They maintain their position not through generosity, but through careful rationing of knowledge, ensuring that others remain dependent upon them. The most disturbing suppressions, however, are those driven by ideological concerns. The Mechanicus has recovered STCs for technologies that would challenge their core doctrines, devices that blur the line between machine and artificial intelligence, biological technologies that achieve through genetic engineering what the Mechanicus believes should only be done through mechanical augmentation. Manufacturing systems so automated they require minimal human oversight, threatening the Mechanicus's economic model based on tech priest expertise and servitor labor. Consider the case of the Castigator-class autonomous weapons platform, a STC Titan discovered on the planet Cheronea. This was a war machine larger and more sophisticated than any Titan the Imperium currently fields, equipped with true artificial intelligence that allowed it to fight with terrifying efficiency. When the Grey Knights encountered this machine, they destroyed it not because it was corrupted by chaos or controlled by enemies, but because it represented abominable intelligence. The STC data was partially recovered by the Mechanicus and then locked away in the deepest vaults, never to be used. Why? Because manufacturing such machines would require the Mechanicus to violate their prohibition against AI, or more accurately, to admit that the prohibition has always been flexible when it served their purposes. The Legio Cybernetica already fields robots with sophisticated machine spirits. The Castellan robots possess what amounts to limited AI, controlled only by the rigid programming of their doctrina wafers. The difference between these accepted technologies and the Castigator is one of degree, not kind, and admitting that would open questions the Mechanicus prefers to keep closed. The Mechanicus also hides the fact that many STCs they recover are not pristine archives from humanity's golden age, but corrupted versions that have been influenced by chaos, Xenos technology, or simple data degradation over millennia. These corrupted STCs present a particular problem, because they often contain knowledge that is valuable but tainted. The Mechanicus must then decide what to salvage and what to destroy, making judgments that their doctrine claims only the Omnissiah should make. Take the standard template. Constructor discovered on Menazoid Epsilon during the Sabbat Worlds Crusade. This was not merely an STC database, but an actual manufacturing facility capable of producing men of iron, the ancient artificial intelligences that nearly destroyed humanity. It had been corrupted by chaos during its long isolation on a tainted world, but the core technology remained intact. Colonel Commissar Ibram Gaunt destroyed it, rather than allow it to fall into the wrong hands. But the fact that such a device existed and functioned raises troubling questions about how many other STCs remain hidden, waiting to be discovered by those who might lack Gaunt's scruples. The Mechanicus' relationship with forbidden technologies extends beyond STCs to archaeotech of all kinds. They maintain the official position that all technology from the Dark Age should be recovered, studied, and integrated into the Imperium's arsenal. Unofficially, they make constant judgments about what should be preserved and what should be destroyed, what should be shared and what should be hidden. These decisions are made by individual magi based on their own understanding, prejudices, and political considerations, creating a patchwork of inconsistent policies that varies from forge, world to forge, world. This inconsistency creates opportunities for what the Mechanicus calls heretic, but which might more accurately be described as independent research. Tech priests who disagree with official policies regarding forbidden knowledge don't always accept those prohibitions. Some believe that all knowledge should be pursued regardless of danger. Others convince themselves that they can control technologies that others fear. These individuals pursue research in secret, often making genuine breakthroughs, sometimes falling into corruption or madness, occasionally discovering things that the Mechanicus hierarchy would prefer remained hidden.
You know, I've spent quite a while diving into Warhammer lore, and the Mechanicus still fascinates me more than any other faction. There's something deeply unsettling about an organization that claimed to worship knowledge while actively suppressing it. It reminds me of the real-world institutions throughout history that hoarded information to maintain power. What gets me every time is thinking about all those tech priests who genuinely believe they're serving humanity, who've sacrificed their own bodies in pursuit of understanding, completely unaware that their entire fate is built on a lie. That's the real tragedy here. Not the deception itself, but the fact that so many sincere believers have dedicated everything to a cause that fundamentally betrays its own stated principles. But anyways, let's get back to the story.
The Dark Mechanicum, those tech priests who sided with Horus during the Great Heresy, have no such qualms about forbidden technology. They modify STCs, combine human technology with Xenos devices, and deliberately pursue innovations that the loyal Mechanicus considers blasphemy. Ironically, this means the Dark Mechanicum often achieves greater technological advancement than their loyal counterparts, unbound by the restrictions that limit Mechanicus research. They pay for this advancement with corruption and instability. But the fact remains that the prohibition against innovation serves not to protect humanity, but to constrain it. The Mechanicus hides another uncomfortable truth about STCs and ancient technology. They hide the fact that they've lost the ability to fully understand what they recover. An STC isn't just a blueprint, it's a complete knowledge transfer system. But the Mechanicus has lost the context necessary to properly interpret these systems. They can often figure out what a device does, but not why it does it that way, not how to modify it for new purposes, not how to reproduce the underlying principles in new applications. This means that even when the Mechanicus successfully recovers and implements STC technology, they're essentially cargo culting, following procedures they don't fully comprehend because those procedures produce desired results. They've become technological archaeologists rather than engineers, able to unearth the past, but unable to build upon it. And they hide this fundamental inadequacy behind ritual and mysticism, pretending that their inability to innovate is actually sacred preservation of ancient wisdom. Perhaps most damningly, the Mechanicus hides the fact that some of the Imperium's current technological limitations are self-imposed. They could, if they chose, develop new technologies based on existing knowledge. The principles of physics haven't changed since the Dark Age. The raw materials are still available. Human intelligence hasn't decreased. What's missing is not capability, but will. Not understanding, but permission. The Mechanicus has chosen stagnation over progress, and they've imposed that choice upon the entire Imperium. This choice has consequences measured in human lives. How many billions die because medical technology remains primitive when it could be advanced? How many wars are lost because weapons remain inferior to what could be built? How many worlds fall to xenos or chaos because defenses remain inadequate when better protection is achievable? The Mechanicus knows these costs, counts them, and accepts them as necessary for maintaining the political and ideological order they've built. In their quest for lost knowledge, the Mechanicus has become the greatest obstacle to new knowledge. In their effort to recover the past, they've sacrificed the future. And they hide these contradictions behind layers of mysticism and ritual, because confronting them would require admitting that their entire approach to technology is fundamentally flawed. The binary cant, language as a weapon of control. When tech priests speak among themselves, they often do so in a language incomprehensible to ordinary humans. This is lingua technis, also called binary cant, a communications protocol that combines elements of ancient machine code, mathematical notation, and religious terminology into a tongue that only the initiated can understand. To outsiders, it sounds like static, like the chirping of broken electronics, like noise without meaning. But to those who have undergone the proper training and implantation, it's as clear as any human language, perhaps clearer, capable of conveying complex technical and mathematical concepts with precision that Gothic could never achieve. The official justification for lingua technis is efficiency and precision. Technical discussions require exact terminology, after all, and a language evolved from machine protocols can communicate engineering concepts more accurately than one evolved from human speech. Moreover, certain aspects of Mechanicus operations require communication at speeds that human speech cannot achieve, necessitating a language that can be transmitted directly between augmetic implants at the pace of electronic thought. But this official justification conceals the real purpose of lingua technis. It exists as a tool of control, a barrier erected between the Mechanicus and the rest of humanity, a way to maintain the monopoly on technical knowledge that gives the Mechanicus its power. By making their communications incomprehensible to outsiders, the tech priests ensure that their knowledge remains theirs alone, inaccessible to those who might learn from eavesdropping or attempt to verify the Mechanicus's claims about technology. Consider what this means in practical terms. When tech priests maintain the engines of an imperial battleship, the ship's officers cannot understand their discussions. When they repair the weapons of a guard regiment, the soldiers cannot learn from watching them work. When they conduct negotiations with imperial officials, they can consult among themselves in a language their counterparts cannot comprehend. This asymmetry of communication creates an imbalance of power, allowing the Mechanicus to keep secrets in plain sight, to coordinate responses to challenges, to maintain unified positions against outside pressure. The Mechanicus takes this even further through their use of what they call nospheric space, a form of augmented reality created by interconnected cogitators and mechadendrites. Tech priests with the proper augmentations can share data, images, schematics, and complex calculations directly through this digital network, conducting entire conversations through pure data transfer that leaves no record outsiders could intercept. Two tech priests standing silently in a room might be engaged in heated debate or detailed technical discussion, and no one without access to the noosphere would ever know. This exclusivity extends to different ranks within the Mechanicus itself. Junior tech priests learn basic lingua technis, but the most sophisticated technical terminology, the highest mathematical concepts, the most sacred machine rights, these are reserved for senior members of the priesthood. A novice can communicate basic technical needs, but cannot fully understand the discussions of magi, ensuring that knowledge remains hierarchical, that advancement comes only through acceptance by those already in power. The Mechanicus also hides the fact that lingua technis is not actually necessary for technical precision. It's perfectly possible to discuss engineering concepts in Gothic if one uses appropriate technical terminology. Mathematics can be expressed in standard notation without requiring machine code. The complexity of lingua technis serves no purpose except to obscure, to exclude, to maintain the mystique that surrounds the Mechanicus, and makes their expertise seem more profound than it might actually be. Moreover, the religious aspects of lingua technis reveal another layer of deception. Tech priests are taught that speaking in machine code brings them closer to the omnissiah, that it's a form of prayer as well as communication. But this conflation of language and faith serves a specific purpose. It makes learning lingua technis not just a technical skill, but a religious experience, binding the speaker more tightly to the cult Mechanicus, and making it psychologically difficult to share this knowledge with outsiders, as doing so would feel like profaning something sacred. The true secret the Mechanicus hides through lingua technis is the arbitrary nature of much of their expertise. If their knowledge were truly systematic and rigorous, it could be taught systematically and rigorously. But much of what passes for technical skill in the Mechanicus is actually ritualized procedure, cargo cult engineering, where the practitioners know what to do, but not why it works. Lingua technis helps obscure this by making their discussions sound more profound than they often are, drowning actual gaps in understanding beneath a flood of technical-sounding jargon. This becomes particularly apparent when tech priests work with ancient technologies they don't fully understand. Rather than admit ignorance, they'll conduct lengthy discussions in lingua technis, debating the proper rituals of activation, the correct prayers to machine spirits, the appropriate offerings of sacred oils and incense. To an outsider, this sounds like deep technical analysis. To another tech priest, it's clear that they're essentially guessing, trying to figure out through trial and error what their predecessors from the Dark Age understood through genuine comprehension. The Mechanicus also uses lingua technis to hide internal conflicts and disagreements from the wider Imperium. The Mechanicus presents itself as monolithic, unified in purpose and theology. The reality is that different Forge worlds have different interpretations of doctrine, different priorities, different relationships with forbidden knowledge. These conflicts sometimes erupt into violence, but more often they're conducted through political maneuvering, subtle sabotage, and ideological debate. By keeping these discussions in lingua technis and away from the noosphere channels that outsiders might monitor, the Mechanicus maintains the fiction of unity even when engaged in internal power struggles. The binary cant also serves to dehumanize those who speak it, which paradoxically serves the Mechanicus's purposes. The more a tech priest converses in machine code, the more their thought patterns begin to mirror those of machines. They start to think in binary, to see the world through logarithmic rather than linear frameworks, to approach problems with machine logic rather than human intuition. This transformation is presented as sacred, as becoming more like the omnissiah, but it's also deeply limiting, removing the flexibility and creativity that human thinking provides. This programmatic thinking makes tech priests more predictable, more controllable, easier to manage within the hierarchies of the Mechanicus. A tech priest who thinks like a machine will follow established procedures rather than innovating, will respect hierarchy rather than questioning it, will prioritize order over insight. The very language they speak reshapes their cognition in ways that serve the institution's need for conformity and stability. Perhaps most insidiously, lingua technis allows the Mechanicus to hide their theological doubts, even from themselves. Complex theological and philosophical questions can be reduced to binary formulations, yes or no questions that eliminate nuance and uncertainty. Does the omnissiah exist? Binary 1 for yes, 0 for no. Is innovation heresy? 1 for yes, 0 for no. The reality that these questions don't have simple answers, that theology and philosophy require careful consideration of context and consequence, gets lost in the reduction to machine logic. The Mechanicus hides behind language because language shapes thought, and by controlling the language available for discussing technology, they control how people think about technology. They've created a linguistic prison where certain ideas become literally inexpressible, where innovation cannot be articulated because the words for it have been replaced with words for heresy, where questions about the foundations of their beliefs cannot be asked because the conceptual framework for asking them has been deliberately excluded from permissible discourse. The horror of servitude, what they don't tell you about servitors. Walk through any Imperial facility and you'll encounter them. Hunched figures that might once have been human, now festooned with mechanical appendages, their faces vacant, their movements jerky and purposeful. They carry heavy loads that would crush a normal human. They perform repetitive tasks with mechanical precision. They fight with weapons grafted directly to their bodies. They are servitors, the Imperium's answer to the prohibition against artificial intelligence, and they represent one of the most horrifying secrets the Goinka Mechanicus keeps from the wider population. The official explanation for servitors is straightforward and almost reassuring. They're necessary tools, the Mechanicus teaches. With true artificial intelligence forbidden as abominable intelligence, humanity needs some way to create mechanical workers for tasks too dangerous, repetitive, or degrading for normal humans. Servitors fill this role, combining the reliability of machines with enough organic components to avoid the prohibition against AI. Many are vat-grown clones created specifically for this purpose, who never possess true consciousness. Others are criminals sentenced to servitude in perpetuis for their crimes against the Imperium, particularly crimes against the Mechanicus itself. This explanation makes servitor creation sound almost humanitarian. Vat-grown clones who never had consciousness suffer no loss of it. Criminals receive an opportunity to atone for their sins through service, offering their bodies to the omnicia in a way that benefits society. It's presented as just, efficient, and necessary. But this presentation conceals the true horror of what servitor creation entails and the secrets the Mechanicus keeps about the process. The first secret is the pain. The servitorization process is described in official documents as mind-wiping or lobotomization, clinical terms that suggest a quick surgical procedure. The reality is far worse. The subject undergoes extensive neurological modification, having portions of their brain surgically removed or chemically cauterized while remaining conscious for much of the procedure. The pain is described by those rare few who have witnessed the process as beyond anything most humans will ever experience. The screaming, they say, continues even after the vocal cords are removed, forcing its way through throats that can no longer produce sound. Why keep the subject conscious? The Mechanicus claims it's necessary for monitoring brain function during the procedure, ensuring that the right portions are removed or modified while preserving those needed for basic servitor operation. But some within the Mechanicus whisper a darker truth. The pain itself is part of the punishment, a deterrent to others who might consider crimes against the Mechanicum. The suffering is the point, even if this contradicts the Mechanicus's supposed rationality and efficiency. The second secret is the survival of consciousness in some servitors. The official doctrine states that servitorization removes all higher brain function, leaving only the minimum necessary for programmed responses to commands. The servitor feels nothing, thinks nothing, knows nothing beyond its assigned task. But this is a lie, or at best a hopeful claim that doesn't match reality. Servitor creation is not an exact science, and the human brain is far more complex than even the Mechanicus fully understands. Sometimes the lobotomization is incomplete. Sometimes the mind finds paths around the damage, rewiring itself in ways the tech priests didn't anticipate. Sometimes what remains is not quite consciousness in the full sense, but enough awareness to suffer, to understand what has been done, to exist in a nightmare state of being trapped in one's own body, unable to control its actions, forced to follow programming, while some fragment of the original person screams silently within their own skull. The Mechanicus knows this happens because they've observed it. Servitors whose eyes track faces they once knew. Servitors who hesitate before following orders that violate what remains of their previous moral framework. Servitors who, when systems fail or suffer damage, suddenly regain enough control to beg for death, to plead for release, before their programming reasserts control and they return to mindless compliance. These cases are documented, studied, and then suppressed, because admitting that servitors might retain consciousness would transform the practice from utilitarian necessity to unthinkable cruelty. In some cases, this retention of consciousness is deliberate. Certain criminals, particularly those who have committed the most severe offenses against the Mechanicus, are servitorized with the explicit intention of preserving their awareness. They become fully conscious prisoners in their own bodies, forced to serve the organization they wronged, aware of every moment, unable to die, unable to escape, unable even to communicate their torment. This practice is whispered about in the deepest vaults of Mars, spoken of as the ultimate punishment, a fate worse than any execution. But it's never publicly acknowledged, because doing so would reveal the depths of cruelty the Mechanicus is willing to inflict. The third secret is the source of some servitors. While many are indeed vat-grown or created from criminals, the Mechanicus quietly accepts servitors created from other sources. On some worlds, the desperately poor sell themselves into servitorization to provide for their families. On others, dissidents, political enemies, or those who simply ask too many questions disappear into the manufactorums and emerge as servitors. The Mechanicus doesn't ask too many questions about where the raw materials for servitor creation come from, and they actively suppress inquiries from others. This creates a perverse economy where human beings become a resource to be harvested. Forge worlds require vast numbers of servitors for their operations, and the demand sometimes exceeds the supply of criminals and vat-grown clones. When this happens, other sources must be found, and the Mechanicus's official stance of only servitorizing criminals becomes flexible enough to accommodate practical necessities. After all, who would know the difference once the conversion is complete? A servitor created from an innocent looks the same as one created from a criminal. The fourth secret is the failure rate. Not all servitor conversions succeed. The human brain is delicate, and the extensive modifications required for servitorization sometimes go wrong. The result is creatures that are neither functional servitors nor viable humans, things that must be kept alive because the Mechanicus considers their mechanical components too valuable to discard, but which exist in states of constant malfunction and distress. These failed servitors are hidden away in the lowest levels of forge worlds, in chambers that few are allowed to enter, where their malfunctions and suffering can be contained away from observers who might question the Mechanicus's methods. Perhaps the most disturbing secret about servitors is how the Mechanicus regards them. To the tech priests, servitors are not, and have never been, human. They are machines that happen to contain biological components, no different in principle from any other tool. This mindset allows the Mechanicus to use servitors in ways that would be unthinkable if they acknowledged any residual humanity. Servitors are sent into radioactive environments that will kill them slowly. They're used as test subjects for experimental weapons. They're dismantled for parts when they malfunction rather than repaired. They're treated, in every way, as disposable equipment. This attitude reveals something fundamental about the Mechanicus's relationship with humanity itself. The flesh, they teach, is weak and corrupt. The machine is pure and eternal. Therefore, the more one removes flesh and replaces it with machinery, the more sacred one becomes. Servitorization is simply the logical extreme of this process, the removal of everything human except what's minimally necessary for biological function. And if some fragment of humanity remains, trapped and suffering in that mechanical shell, well, that's merely the last weakness of the flesh making itself known before it's finally purged. The Mechanicus hides the true nature of servitors because revealing it would undermine one of their most basic practices and raise questions about their entire philosophy. If servitors suffer, if consciousness persists, if the process is as cruel as it appears, then what does that say about the tech priests who create them? What does it say about an organization that turns human beings into tools, that destroys minds to create mindless slaves, that considers this not merely acceptable but sacred? Moreover, the servitor question leads to uncomfortable parallels with the tech priests themselves. A senior magos might have replaced 90% of their body with machinery, leaving only a small amount of brain tissue and a few vital organs. At what point does such a being stop being human and become simply a machine that contains biological components? The difference between a heavily augmented tech priest and a servitor is supposed to be consciousness and will. But if servitors retain consciousness, then the distinction becomes alarmingly thin. The servitor also reveals the fundamental contradiction in the Mechanicus' prohibition against AI. They claim that artificial intelligence is abominable because machines should not think, should not have will, should not make autonomous decisions. Yet they create servitors specifically to provide exactly these capabilities, wrapping human brains in machinery to create programmable intelligence. The only difference between a servitor and a sophisticated AI is the biological components. Yet somehow this difference transforms the blasphemous into the sacred. It's a distinction without a meaningful difference, and the Mechanicus knows it. In the end, servitors represent the Mechanicus' willingness to inflict any horror, to commit any atrocity, to engage in any practice, if it can be justified by their theology and their political needs. They are the proof that the Mechanicus' devotion to knowledge and truth is hollow, that beneath their claims of rationality lies the same capacity for cruelty and moral compromise that infects all human institutions. And they hide this truth behind euphemisms and official explanations, because confronting it would require confronting what they have become. Heretic. When innovation becomes heresy, the Mechanicus maintains an official stance that they seek knowledge above all else. They dispatch explorator fleets to the far reaches of the galaxy, searching for lost technologies. They excavate ancient ruins, hoping to find STC fragments. They study captured Xenos equipment to understand alien principles. The quest for knowledge, they proclaim, is their sacred duty to the Omnissiah, their highest calling, the purpose for which their order exists. But this proclaimed devotion to knowledge comes with extensive restrictions. Certain types of knowledge are forbidden, certain lines of inquiry are prohibited, certain experimental approaches are declared heretical. The Mechanicus doesn't actually seek all knowledge. They seek specific types of knowledge, obtained through approved methods, directed towards sanctioned goals. And those who pursue knowledge outside these boundaries, no matter how pure their motivations or how significant their discoveries, are branded as heretic and hunted accordingly. The definition of heretic is deliberately vague, giving the Mechanicus flexibility in determining what constitutes forbidden research. Officially, a heretic is one who violates the sacred principles of the cult Mechanicus, who pursues knowledge that offends the Omnissiah, who follows paths that lead away from approved understanding. In practice, heretic is whatever the Mechanicus hierarchy decides it is, applied selectively based on political considerations as much as theological ones. Innovation, despite all the Mechanicus' claims about seeking knowledge, is the most reliable path to being declared heretic. A tech priest who discovers a better way to configure a plasma drive, who improves upon an existing STC pattern, who develops a new application for established technology, is more likely to be punished than rewarded. The Mechanicus teaches that all true knowledge comes from the Dark Age, that innovation is impossible because the ancients already achieved perfection, that attempting to improve upon STC patterns is presumptuous at best and heretical at worst. This prohibition against innovation serves multiple purposes. It maintains the mystique of ancient technology, supporting the Mechanicus's claim that they are recovering lost wisdom, rather than admitting they don't understand what they've found. It prevents individual tech priests from gaining too much personal power through unique discoveries. It ensures conformity and orthodox thinking across the Mechanicus. And perhaps most importantly, it prevents the development of technologies that might challenge existing power structures. But the prohibition also stifles genuine progress and dooms humanity to technological stagnation. Consider a tech priest who discovers a way to improve the efficiency of the plasma reactors used in Imperial spacecraft. This improvement could save lives, extend ship range, reduce fuel consumption, and provide strategic advantages. But presenting this innovation would require admitting that the existing STC pattern was imperfect, that modern understanding has advanced beyond ancient templates, that the Omnissiah's gift needed improvement. Rather than celebration, this discovery would likely result in censure, with the improving tech priest accused of tech heresy and their work suppressed. The Mechanicus hides the fact that many declared heretics are not corrupted madmen or chaos-worshipping heretics. They are often the most brilliant minds in the Mechanicus, individuals whose only crime was being too curious, too innovative, too willing to question established doctrine. The Dark Mechanicum, those who sided with Horus during the heresy, counted among their number some of Mars's greatest technical minds, tech priests, who saw in Horus's rebellion an opportunity to escape the stifling orthodoxy that had come to dominate their cult. The irony is that the Dark Mechanicum, unbound by the restrictions that limit their loyal counterparts, often achieves greater technological advancement. They freely modify STCs. They combine human technology with Xenos devices. They pursue research into areas the loyal Mechanicus declares forbidden. They innovate, experiment, and advance. Yes, they pay for this freedom with chaos, corruption, and the instability it brings, but the fact remains that forbidden research often yields results that orthodox methods cannot achieve. The Mechanicus also uses the label of heretic to suppress research that challenges their theological positions. Tech priests who investigate the nature of machine spirits too closely, who study the boundary between sophisticated programming and true consciousness, who research the actual causes of the Men of Iron rebellion. These individuals often find themselves declared heretic, regardless of the quality of their work. The crime is not poor scholarship, but asking questions the Mechanicus would prefer remained unasked. Particularly dangerous are those heretics who begin to question whether the prohibition against AI is actually justified. The Mechanicus bases much of its authority on being the guardians against abominable intelligence, the protectors who prevent humanity from repeating the mistakes that led to the cybernetic revolt. But what if that prohibition is overly broad? What if not all AI is dangerous? What if the Men of Iron rebelled for specific reasons that could be avoided in new designs? These questions threaten the foundation of Mechanicus power, and those who ask them too loudly or persistently tend to disappear. There exists within the Mechanicus a secret group known as the Cambrians, tech priests who study AI despite the prohibition. They believe that understanding why the Men of Iron rebelled requires studying artificial intelligence directly, that you cannot guard against a threat you don't understand, that the blanket prohibition against all AI research leaves humanity vulnerable to threats they cannot comprehend. The official Mechanicus response to Cambrians is ruthless suppression. When discovered, they're hunted down by Mechanicus security forces, sometimes with assistance from the Inquisition or even Space Marine chapters. Yet despite this persecution, the Cambrians persist. passing their research through secret networks, hidden in encrypted data caches that only the initiated can access. The Mechanicus hides the fact that much of what they call heretech is actually rediscovery of ancient techniques. Tech priests declared heretical for their innovations often turn out to have independently discovered principles that were common knowledge during the Dark Age. Their crime isn't creating something new, but figuring out something old without proper authorization. The Mechanicus's prohibition against innovation is so severe that even rediscovering lost knowledge through independent research is treated as heresy if it wasn't done through approved channels. This creates a self-defeating cycle. The Mechanicus claims to seek lost knowledge from the Dark Age, but when tech priests actually recover such knowledge through their own research and reasoning, they are punished for it. The only acceptable way to recover ancient knowledge is to find it written in STC templates or ancient databanks. Understanding through independent thought and experimentation is forbidden. This effectively means the Mechanicus has abandoned the scientific method, the very foundation of the technological advancement they claim to revere. The psychological impact of the heretic label is profound. Tech priests are trained from their earliest days that certain lines of inquiry are forbidden, that certain questions must not be asked, that certain research paths lead to corruption and damnation. This creates a culture of intellectual timidity, where even brilliant minds confine themselves to safe, orthodox thinking. The fear of being declared heretic becomes a more effective restraint than any external enforcement could achieve. Yet human curiosity cannot be entirely suppressed. There will always be those who wonder what lies beyond the boundaries, who question why certain knowledge is forbidden, who pursue understanding despite the risks. These individuals face a cruel choice: suppress their curiosity and live within the confines of Mechanicus orthodoxy, or follow their intellectual drives and risk being declared heretic with all the persecution that entails. Some choose a third path, conducting forbidden research in secret while maintaining a facade of orthodoxy. They hide their innovations, claiming they're simply properly applying ancient techniques. They disguise their discoveries as recovered STC data. They share their findings only with trusted colleagues through encrypted channels. This underground network of secret research persists throughout the Mechanicus, known to the hierarchy but tolerated within limits because it sometimes produces useful results that can be quietly appropriated. The Mechanicus hides the extent of this secret research network because admitting it exists would reveal that their prohibition against innovation is widely ignored, that even orthodox tech priests recognize the necessity of experimentation and advancement, that the official doctrine is honored more in the breach than in the observance. It would reveal that the Mechanicus is not the monolithic, orthodox institution it presents itself as, but rather a collection of competing factions with different views on acceptable research, different interpretations of what constitutes heretic, different relationships with forbidden knowledge. Perhaps the darkest secret the Mechanicus keeps about heretic is this: they need it. They need tech priests to push boundaries so they can see what lies beyond. They need innovators to experiment so they can appropriate successful innovations while disavowing failed ones. They need some individuals to ask forbidden questions because without such questioning, the Mechanicus would ossify completely. So they maintain the prohibition against heretic while quietly permitting just enough transgression to maintain minimal progress. A carefully calibrated hypocrisy that allows them to have their doctrinal purity while still achieving some technological advancement. The warp and the machine, chaos, scrap code, and corruption. The Mechanicus teaches that machines are pure, that the cold logic of steel and silicon is incorruptible, that unlike weak flesh, which can be tempted and turned, the machine remains faithful to its programming. This doctrine provides comfort to tech priests who have replaced much of their bodies with mechanical components, reassuring them that their augmentation makes them less vulnerable to chaos corruption, not more. It supports their belief in the superiority of machine over flesh, metal over meat. But this doctrine is a lie, and the Mechanicus knows it. Machines can be corrupted. The warp can touch silicon as readily as it touches flesh. Demons can possess machine spirits just as they possess human souls. The realm of chaos extends its influence across all matter and energy, caring nothing for the distinction between organic and inorganic. And the Mechanicus has known this truth since the Horus heresy, when they watched their most sacred forges fall to corruption, when they saw their greatest war machines turned against them, when they learned that no amount of mechanical augmentation could protect against the touch of the dark gods. The primary vector for chaos corruption of machines is something the Mechanicus calls scrap code. This term encompasses malicious data that can infect machine spirits, corrupting their functions and turning them against their masters. The official explanation presents scrap code as a kind of computer virus, suggesting it's a purely technical problem that can be combated with proper security protocols and ritual purification. But this explanation deliberately minimizes the true nature of scrap code. Scrap code is not merely malicious code. It's chaos itself translated into information, the corrupting influence of the warp expressed as data. It doesn't work according to rational principles of computer science. It cannot be fully defended against through normal security measures. It spreads not just through logical connections, but through proximity, through observation, sometimes through nothing more than being in the presence of infected systems. It's a demonic infection that happens to target machines rather than flesh. When scrap code infects a machine spirit, the results can be devastating. Weapons turn on their wielders. Ships navigate into the warp and never return, or return changed, in ways that defy explanation. Manufacturing systems begin producing twisted versions of their intended products, items that look correct, but function in ways that spread corruption to those who use them. The infection can remain dormant for years, waiting for the optimal moment to activate and cause maximum damage. The Mechanicus hides the fact that they have no reliable defense against scrap code. They've developed procedures they call scrap code purge protocols, rituals of digital exorcism that sometimes work and sometimes don't. The success of these protocols seems to depend as much on faith and ritual as on any technical measures, which deeply troubles the Mechanicus, even as it reinforces their religious approach to technology. They cannot admit that something exists which their technical expertise cannot reliably counter, so they pretend to greater understanding and control than they actually possess. Worse still, the Mechanicus hides the fact that scrap code can infect their own cybernetic augmentations. A tech priest who has replaced their brain with cogitators, their nervous system with data cables, their consciousness with machine logic. Such a being is potentially vulnerable to scrap code infection in ways that purely biological beings are not. The more augmented a tech priest becomes, the more pathways exist for corruption to take hold. The Horus heresy provided abundant evidence of this vulnerability. When the fabricator general Kelbor Hal betrayed the emperor and sided with Horus, he brought with him not just his personal forces, but entire forge worlds, vast armies of Skitarii, and massive Titan legions. The corruption spread through the Martian networks like wildfire, jumping from cogitator to cogitator, from tech priest to tech priest, turning the very infrastructure of Mars into a vector for chaos infection. The subsequent schism of Mars, the civil war that tore the red planet apart, revealed that machines could be corrupted as readily as flesh, that chaos could turn the Mechanicus' own technology against them, that all their mechanical augmentation provided no protection against the dark gods. This revelation should have fundamentally challenged the Mechanicus' doctrine about the purity of machines. But instead, it was suppressed, minimized, explained away with theological gymnastics about the difference between true machines and those corrupted by heresy. The Dark Mechanicum, those who sided with chaos during the heresy and fled to the Eye of Terror, proved that the corruption of machines and machine-augmented humans is not only possible, but can be stable over millennia. The Dark Mechanicum openly embraces demon engines, machines possessed by warp entities that combine mechanical function with demonic power. They create weapons that blend technology and sorcery. They pursue innovations that the loyal Mechanicus considers not merely heretical, but abominable. Yet these innovations work, producing results that exceed what pure technology can achieve. The existence and capabilities of the Dark Mechanicum create theological problems for the loyal Mechanicus. If the dark gods can grant knowledge and power, if chaos-influenced research produces working technologies, if demon engines function reliably despite their corruption, then what does that say about the Omnissiah's role as the source of all knowledge? How can the Mechanicus claim that only their orthodox approach reveals truth when chaos-worshipping tech priests achieve things orthodox practitioners cannot? The Mechanicus handles these uncomfortable questions through denial and suppression. They claim that Dark Mechanicum technology is unstable, that it inevitably fails, that the apparent advantages come with hidden costs. Some of this is true. Demon engines are indeed unstable, their machine spirits constantly at war with the demons possessing them. Warp-influenced technology does sometimes fail catastrophically, turning on its users or transforming in unpredictable ways. But these problems don't negate the fact that Dark Mechanicum achieve results, that chaos corruption of machines is real and effective, that the boundary between acceptable and forbidden is less clear than the Mechanicus pretends. Machine spirits themselves present problems that the Mechanicus would prefer not to examine too closely. The official doctrine teaches that machine spirits are blessings from the Omnissiah, divine sparks that dwell within sophisticated machines and must be appeased through proper ritual. But what actually are machine spirits? Are they truly divine in origin, or are they emergent properties of complex systems, or something else entirely? The Mechanicus has evidence suggesting that machine spirits might be minor warp entities, essentially tiny demons that have taken up residence in complex machinery. This would explain why they respond to ritual and prayer, why they seem to have something approaching personalities, why they can be corrupted by chaos. But admitting this would mean acknowledging that the machines the Mechanicus venerates are already touched by the warp, that the distinction between pure machine and demon engine is one of degree rather than kind. There's also the question of whether highly augmented tech priests develop something analogous to machine spirits in their augmentations. As more and more of a person is replaced with machinery, at what point does the consciousness cease to be purely the original human and become something hybrid, part biological mind and part machine intelligence? Tech priests sometimes report sensing their augmentations as extensions of their will, but also as having their own tendencies, their own preferences, their own subtle resistance to certain commands. Are these machine spirits? Are they fragments of the tech priest's consciousness distributed across their augmentations? Are they something else entirely? The Mechanicus suppresses research into these questions because the answers might reveal that their fundamental understanding of the relationship between consciousness, machines, and the warp is flawed. They've built their entire theological and technical framework on the assumption that machines are separate from and superior to the warp, that augmentation moves one away from chaos vulnerability rather than toward it. If this assumption is wrong, then everything they've taught for 10,000 years is called into question. Perhaps most troubling is the evidence that some machines might attract warp attention, not through corruption, but through their very sophistication. Particularly complex and powerful machines, things like Titan God engines or the largest starships, seem to develop presences in the warp, psychic impressions that persist even when the machines themselves are destroyed. The Mechanicus calls these honored machine spirits and venerates them as holy, but they might actually be warp entities formed from the concentrated belief and emotional investment that crews pour into their machines. If this is true, then the Mechanicus' own veneration of machines might be creating the very warped presences they worship, a self-fulfilling prophecy where belief in machine spirits causes machine spirits to exist. This would mean that the Mechanicus has been inadvertently conducting mass ritual sorcery for 10,000 years, calling entities into existence through concentrated faith and then worshipping them as aspects of the Omnissiah. The Mechanicus hides all of this because admitting it would undermine their entire philosophical foundation. They cannot acknowledge that machines are vulnerable to chaos corruption without calling into question their doctrine of mechanical purity. They cannot admit that machine spirits might be warp entities without confessing that they've been trafficking with the warp all along. They cannot explore the true nature of augmented consciousness without risking discoveries that would challenge the hierarchy of humanity versus machine, flesh versus steel, mortal versus divine. So they maintain the fiction that machines are pure and incorruptible, that scrap code is merely a technical problem, that machine spirits are blessings from the Omnissiah, that augmentation provides protection rather than creating vulnerabilities. And they hunt down those who ask too many questions about these matters, declaring them heretic, because the alternative would be to confront truths that would shatter everything they've built. The Emperor's Bargain, the Treaty of Olympus Mons, the official history of the Imperium teaches that the Emperor united humanity through a combination of military might and visionary leadership. He conquered terror, bringing the warring techno-barbarians under his control. Then he turned his attention to Mars, and through a combination of diplomacy and mutual interest, he forged an alliance with the Mechanicum that would become the foundation of the Imperium's technological infrastructure. The Treaty of Olympus Mons, signed in the early stages of the Great Crusade, formalized this alliance. The Mechanicum agreed to provide technological support, manufacturing capability, and technical expertise to the Emperor's expanding Imperium. In exchange, they received autonomy over their forge worlds, official recognition of their religious beliefs, and the exclusive right to manage all technological matters within imperial space. This arrangement has endured for 10,000 years, making the Mechanicus nearly as old as the Imperium itself and far more stable than many imperial institutions. It's presented as a partnership of equals, a meeting of minds between the Emperor's vision and the Mechanicum's expertise, a union that benefits both parties and serves humanity's greater good. But this official history conceals the true nature of the bargain, the concessions made on both sides, and the secrets that were agreed to be kept. The Treaty of Olympus Mons was not a meeting of equals. It was a negotiation between the Emperor, who needed the resources and expertise of Mars to fuel his great crusade, and the Mechanicum, who feared being conquered but recognized an opportunity to expand their own power and influence. The Emperor came to these negotiations knowing far more about Mars than he revealed. He knew what slept beneath the Noctis Labyrinthus. He knew the true source of the machine worship that had developed on Mars. He almost certainly knew that the Mechanicum's theology was not entirely compatible with his own plans for a secular Imperium free from religion. Yet he accepted their religious framework, allowed them to worship him as the Omnissiah, and granted them exemption from the anti-religious policies he was implementing elsewhere. Why make these concessions? Because the Emperor needed Mars. He needed their forges to equip his armies. He needed their ships to transport his forces across the galaxy. He needed their technical expertise to maintain the infrastructure of interstellar civilization. Without Mars, the Great Crusade would have been impossible. With Mars, he could unite humanity under one banner and push back the Xenos threats that pressed in from all sides. But the price of this alliance was steep. The Emperor effectively granted the Mechanicum a monopoly on technology, making humanity permanently dependent on a single institution for all technical knowledge and innovation. He allowed them to maintain secrets, to restrict knowledge, to operate largely outside imperial oversight. He permitted them to enforce their religious doctrines even in contradiction to his own stated goals. He created, in essence, an empire within the Imperium, a state within the state that answered to its own leaders before it answered to his authority. The Mechanicum, for their part, got what they needed most: legitimacy and protection. Before the treaty, they were a fractious collection of forge worlds and tech cults, vulnerable to external threats and internal division. After the treaty, they were an official part of the Imperium, protected by the Emperor's military might and granted authority that extended across all human space. They could pursue their quest for knowledge under Imperial protection, expand to new forge worlds discovered during the Great Crusade, and enforce their technological monopoly with the backing of Imperial law. The Mechanicum also secured crucial autonomy in several areas. They maintained control over their own forge worlds, governing them according to their own laws and traditions. They kept authority over technical matters, ensuring that no other imperial institution could challenge their expertise or restrict their research. They gained the exclusive right to explore and excavate sites from the Dark Age of technology, ensuring that any STC discoveries would come to them first. But perhaps the most significant aspect of the treaty, the one that both sides have carefully hidden from the wider Imperium, was the agreement about what would not be discussed. The Emperor agreed not to push too hard on the nature of the Mechanicum's beliefs, not to investigate too closely what inspired their worship of machines. The Mechanicum agreed not to publicize certain discoveries about the Emperor's own nature and methods, particularly those related to his use of forbidden knowledge and potentially heretical technology. This mutual agreement to keep secrets created a partnership based on controlled deception. Both sides knew things about each other that could be devastating if revealed. The Emperor knew about the Void Dragon beneath Mars. The Mechanicum knew about the Emperor's traffic with the Warp, his genetic engineering of the Primarchs, his use of technologies that by their own standards should be considered abominable intelligence. Neither side could afford to reveal these secrets without risking their own exposure, creating a kind of mutually assured revelation that ensured cooperation. The treaty also established boundaries that would later prove problematic. It exempted the Mechanicum from certain imperial laws and regulations, giving them latitude to conduct research and implement policies that might otherwise be prohibited. This exemption was necessary to gain their cooperation, but it meant that the Mechanicum could pursue lines of research, employ methods, and maintain practices that would be unacceptable elsewhere in the Imperium. For example, the servitor, which might be considered a violation of human dignity in other contexts, is explicitly protected under the treaty as a necessary technical practice. The Mechanicum's right to restrict and control technical knowledge, which might be seen as hindering progress, is enshrined as their religious prerogative. Their use of cybernetic augmentation, which could be viewed as corruption of the human form, is recognized as sacred. Pursuit of unity with the Omnissiah. The Horus heresy tested the treaty in ways its framers never anticipated. When the Fabricator General sided with Horus, he claimed the Emperor had violated the treaty's terms, that the Emperor's plans for humanity included appropriating Mechanicum knowledge and expertise while suppressing their religious beliefs. Whether this claim had merit remains debated, but it succeeded in bringing significant portions of the Mechanicum into the heresy, splitting Mars itself in a civil war that mirrored the larger conflict. The surviving Mechanicum, now reorganized as the Adeptus Mechanicus, claimed they had remained loyal to the original treaty while the traitors had violated it. But the truth is more complex. The heresy revealed that the treaty was always built on unstable foundations, that the contradictions between Mechanicum theology and imperial doctrine had never been truly resolved, merely papered over with mutual benefit and selective blindness. After the heresy, a new interpretation of the treaty emerged. The Adeptus Mechanicus became more integrated into imperial hierarchy, while simultaneously becoming more protective of their autonomy. They accepted more oversight from other imperial institutions, while more carefully guarding their core secrets. The partnership became more formalized and more fragile at the same time. The modern Imperium treats the treaty as sacred and unchangeable, but both sides occasionally push against its boundaries. The Mechanicus sometimes uses their monopoly on technology to influence imperial policy, withholding support from those who displease them, or providing extra assistance to those who support their interests. Other imperial institutions sometimes attempt to develop their own technical expertise, creating organizations that skirt the edges of Mechanicus prerogatives without directly violating them. What the Mechanicus hides about the treaty is the extent to which it has shaped imperial policy and prevented reform. Many of the Imperium's problems, from technological stagnation to inefficient manufacturing to the horrifying practice of servitorization, could potentially be addressed through policy changes. But the treaty protects Mechanicus autonomy in these areas, making reform essentially impossible without renegotiating the fundamental agreement that binds the Mechanicus to the Imperium. The Mechanicus also hides the fact that they have, on several occasions, come close to breaking the treaty. During periods of internal conflict, or when imperial policy has pressed too hard on their interests, factions within the Mechanicus have discussed withdrawing from the Imperium entirely, taking their forge worlds and technical knowledge and leaving the rest of humanity to fend for themselves. These discussions have never resulted in action, but their existence reveals how contingent the alliance truly is. Perhaps most significantly, the Mechanicus hides how much power the treaty actually grants them. In theory, they serve the Imperium. In practice, their monopoly on technology makes them nearly as powerful as the Imperium itself. They can bring imperial worlds to their knees by withdrawing technical support. They can influence wars by controlling where weapons and equipment are sent. They can make or break imperial policies by deciding whether to provide the technical infrastructure necessary to implement them. This power is checked only by the Mechanicus's own dependence on the Imperium for protection, raw materials, and the political legitimacy that imperial recognition provides. It's a balance of mutual dependence that keeps the alliance stable, but also ensures that neither side can fully trust the other. The Treaty of Olympus Mons was not the beginning of a true partnership. It was the formalization of a necessary compromise, built on secrets and sustained by mutual need rather than mutual trust. The inner circles, secrets within secrets, the Adeptus Mechanicus is not a monolithic organization. To outside observers, it might appear unified in purpose and belief, all tech priests working toward the same goals of recovering lost knowledge and serving the Omnissiah. But this appearance conceals a reality of competing factions, hierarchies within hierarchies, and secrets that even most Mechanicus members never learn. At the lowest levels, the novice tech priests and servitor overseers, the Mechanicus appears relatively straightforward. They learn basic rites, perform simple maintenance tasks, and absorb the fundamental doctrines of the cult Mechanicus. They believe they understand their organization's purpose and methods. They're wrong, but they don't know they're wrong, and this ignorance is deliberately maintained. As tech priests advance in rank and responsibility, they encounter their first major revelation. Much of what they learned as novices was simplified or deliberately false. The machine spirits they were taught to appease through prayer and ritual are more complex than presented. The prohibition against innovation has more nuances than they were told. The hierarchy they thought they understood has additional levels they never suspected. Each new rank brings new secrets and new realizations about how little one truly knows. A magos learns things that ordinary tech priests never discover. An archmagos learns things that magi don't suspect. And at the very top, the fabricator general of Mars and the most senior members of the Mechanicus hierarchy guard secrets that would shock even the archmagi who advise them. This pyramid of knowledge is deliberately constructed. The Mechanicus uses information as a tool of control, revealing truth gradually and only to those deemed worthy and reliable. This approach ensures loyalty, because those who know more feel special, chosen, privileged. It prevents dissent, because those with doubts about official doctrine can be told that understanding will come with advancement. And it protects the most dangerous secrets by ensuring very few people ever learn them. But what are these highest secrets, known only to the inner circles of the Mechanicus? One concerns the true nature and extent of the Mechanicus's lost knowledge. The official position is that the Mechanicus seeks to recover what was lost during the Age of Strife. The truth, known to very few, is that the Mechanicus has already recovered vast amounts of this knowledge, but keeps it locked away. The vaults of Mars contain not just fragments but complete databases, not just hints, but comprehensive instructions, not just pieces, but entire systems of understanding. The quest for lost knowledge is partly real, but it's also partly theatre, a justification for continued exploration and expansion that serves the Mechanicus's political needs. Another secret concerns the relationship between different Forge worlds. Publicly, all Forge worlds are part of the unified Adeptus Mechanicus, following the same doctrines and pursuing the same goals. In reality, Forge worlds are often rivals, competing for resources, influence, and discoveries. Some philosophical and theological differences have erupted into open conflict, with Forge worlds going to war against each other in disputes that officially never happened. The Mechanicus carefully suppresses knowledge of these conflicts to maintain the appearance of unity. Certain Forge worlds have developed specialized knowledge or unusual practices that set them apart. Styges 8, for example, has developed expertise in xenotech, the study of alien technology that is officially forbidden but practically necessary for understanding and countering Xeno's threats. Ryza specializes in plasma technology to a degree that other Forge worlds cannot match. Graia has made discoveries about warp drive efficiency that it guards jealously from other Forge worlds. These specializations create power imbalances within the Mechanicus, with different Forge worlds controlling different crucial technologies. The inner circles also know about the Moire Schism, a conflict that tore the Mechanicus apart during the 35th Millennium. Different factions had developed incompatible interpretations of core Mechanicus doctrines, particularly regarding the relationship between human consciousness and machine augmentation. The resulting conflict involved not just theological debate, but actual warfare, with Forge worlds deploying their Skitarii legions against each other, Titans fighting Titans in battles that left Forge worlds devastated. The schism was eventually resolved, but the compromises that ended it remain classified, known only to the highest ranks. Within the Mechanicus hierarchy exist secret organizations that pursue agendas, hidden even from most senior tech priests. The Xenorites, mentioned earlier, study alien technology in violation of orthodox doctrine, but with tacit approval from parts of the Mechanicus hierarchy who recognize the necessity of understanding Xeno's threats. The Cabanists seek to recreate the Caban machine and other forbidden intelligences, believing that humanity needs such weapons to survive in an increasingly hostile galaxy. The disciples of Thule pursue biological augmentation and genetic engineering, areas the Mechanicus officially leaves to other imperial institutions, but secretly recognizes as crucial to understanding the full scope of human potential. These secret organizations operate in the shadows, known to exist but rarely acknowledged openly. They're tolerated because they pursue research that the Mechanicus recognizes as valuable but cannot officially endorse. They're monitored because they operate dangerously close to the line between acceptable research and heretic. And they're occasionally purged when their research produces results that threaten established interests or challenges fundamental doctrines too directly. The Fabricator General himself is privy to secrets that even other members of the inner circle don't know. He has access to vaults that predate the Imperium, data that was sealed by the Emperor himself, knowledge that is considered too dangerous to share even with other Archmagi. The Fabricator General knows, or at least knows more than anyone else, about what sleeps beneath Mars. He has access to the complete history of the Treaty of Olympus Mons, including provisions that were kept secret even from most of the Mechanicus at the time. He knows which forge worlds can be trusted and which must be watched. He knows where the bodies are buried, sometimes literally. But even the Fabricator General doesn't know everything. The Mechanicus has accumulated secrets over 10,000 years, some deliberately hidden, others simply lost in the vast archives that no single mind could ever fully comprehend. There are vaults on Mars that haven't been opened in millennia, their contents unknown even to the highest authorities. There are data archives so vast and so poorly indexed that crucial information might exist within them, but no one knows it's there. The Mechanicus is drowning in its own secrets, unable to fully access its own knowledge. The inner circles also guard knowledge about the failures of the Mechanicus, the times when their policies led to disaster, when their prohibitions against innovation resulted in catastrophic losses, when their theological rigidity caused problems that more flexible thinking might have avoided. The fall of forge worlds to chaos corruption, sometimes due to the Mechanicus's own policies making them vulnerable. The lost expeditions that found things better left undiscovered. The experimental technologies that went horribly wrong despite being developed according to approved procedures. One particularly well-hidden secret concerns the occasions when the Mechanicus has, in fact, successfully created artificial intelligence. These experiments, conducted in the deepest vaults, under the strictest security, have shown that AI can be created without immediately turning on its creators. These successes don't mean that AI is safe, but they do mean that the absolute prohibition might be overstated. The inner circles know this, but cannot admit it without undermining the fundamental justification for the prohibition. The hierarchies of secrets create strange situations where different parts of the Mechanicus operate on different understandings of reality. A tech priest in a frontier forge world might genuinely believe in the orthodox doctrine, while their superior knows that doctrine is simplified for the masses, but believes in a more sophisticated version, while that superior's superior knows that even the sophisticated version is partly fabricated, while the archmagos above them all knows truths that would shock everyone below. This creates an organization where different levels are working at cross purposes, because they're operating from different versions of reality. The Mechanicus justifies this hierarchical secrecy by claiming that knowledge must be earned, that understanding must be developed gradually, that revealing too much too soon would overwhelm unprepared minds. There's some truth to this. The full complexity of the Mechanicus's situation, with all its contradictions and compromises, might indeed be too much for a novice to process. But this justification also serves to maintain power, to control who advances in the hierarchy, to ensure that those who learn the deepest secrets are those who have already proven their loyalty through years of service. The tragedy is that this system of nested secrets makes solving problems nearly impossible. How can the Mechanicus address its fundamental contradictions when most of its members don't know those contradictions exist? How can it reform its practices when those who understand the need for reform are sworn to secrecy about what they know? How can it adapt to new challenges when adaptation requires acknowledging truths that are hidden from most of the organization? The inner circles of the Mechanicus are trapped in a cage of their own making, unable to share what they know, unable to change what they must maintain, unable to escape the web of lies they've inherited. And they hide this paralysis behind the facade of ancient wisdom and divine authority, because admitting their confusion would be to admit their fundamental inadequacy. Why the lies must continue. With all these secrets exposed, with all these deceptions revealed, the question becomes inevitable. Why? Why does the Mechanicus continue to hide these truths? Why not reveal what they know, reform their practices, and build a more honest foundation for their relationship with the Imperium and with knowledge itself? The answer is as tragic as it is simple. They continue the lies because stopping would be worse. Not because the lies are good or the truths are too terrible to bear, though both these factors play a role, but because the entire structure of imperial civilization has been built upon these deceptions, and removing the foundation would bring the whole edifice crashing down. Consider what would happen if the Mechanicus admitted that the Omnissiah they worship is actually a Cetan shard imprisoned beneath Mars. The immediate response from the wider Imperium would be horror and betrayal. The ecclesiarchy would declare the Mechanicus heretics who have been unknowingly worshipping an alien entity. The Inquisition would launch investigations that would tear the Mechanicus apart. Imperial authorities would question whether any Mechanicus knowledge could be trusted, whether any technology blessed by the priests of Mars was safe to use. The resulting crisis would paralyze the Imperium's technical infrastructure precisely when it can least afford disruption. But more than that, the revelation would destroy the faith that makes the Mechanicus function. Tech priests dedicate their lives to the service of the Omnissiah. Many have replaced most of their bodies with machinery in pursuit of unity with the machine god. They've sacrificed their humanity, their comfort, their very identities in service to what they believed was divine. To learn that their god is a Xenos entity, that their faith has been built on deception, that their sacrifices might have been meaningless, would shatter many of them psychologically. The Mechanicus would tear itself apart from within, different factions developing different responses to the revelation, conflict erupting between those who accept the new truth and those who reject it as lies designed to undermine their faith. The same logic applies to other secrets. If the Mechanicus admitted they possess extensive STC data, but suppress it for political reasons, the Imperium would demand access to that knowledge. They'd be forced to release technologies they've kept controlled, undermining their monopoly and their political leverage. But more than that, releasing all this technology at once, without proper context or understanding of why it was originally restricted, could cause chaos. Weapons too powerful for current strategic doctrine, manufacturing systems that would destabilize existing economic structures, medical technologies that would raise questions about why they've been withheld for so long. If they admitted that their prohibition against innovation is based more on dogma than on genuine technical concerns, they'd be challenged to justify why the Imperium has stagnated technologically for 10,000 years. They'd have to explain how many lives have been lost, how many worlds have fallen, because they refuse to allow the development of better weapons, better defenses, better systems. They'd have to confront the fact that their commitment to ancient knowledge over new discovery has made humanity weaker, not stronger. If they revealed the full horror of servitor creation, including the retention of consciousness in some cases, there would be moral outrage that could force them to abandon the practice. But servitors are integral to imperial infrastructure. Factories depend on them, ships need them, military operations require them. There's no quick replacement for the billions of servitors that keep imperial civilization functioning. Stopping servitor creation would mean accepting massive reductions in productive capacity, potentially causing economic collapse. The Mechanicus is trapped by their own success at integration into imperial structure. They're so thoroughly embedded in every aspect of imperial civilization that any major change to Mechanicus practices would send ripples through the entire Imperium. They cannot reform without destabilizing, cannot reveal without disrupting, cannot change without risking collapse. But beyond these practical concerns lies a deeper reason for continuing the deceptions. The Mechanicus has built an identity around being the keepers of sacred knowledge, the guardians of truth, the bridge between humanity and divine understanding. This identity requires them to know things others don't, to maintain mysteries, to be special. If they admitted that much of their expertise is actually just repetition of poorly understood ancient practices, if they revealed that they're often guessing and hoping rather than truly understanding, they'd lose the mystique that makes them psychologically important to imperial civilization. The Imperium needs to believe that someone understands the technology that keeps civilization functioning. The The common citizen, the Imperial Guard soldier, the navigator steering ships through the warp, all of them need to believe that when they use Imperial technology, someone somewhere understands it completely, has blessed it properly, has ensured it will function as intended. The Mechanicus provides this reassurance, this confidence, this psychological security. Admitting that they don't fully understand much of what they maintain would undermine that confidence, creating anxiety that would ripple through Imperial society. The Mechanicus also continues the lies because, having maintained them for so long, they've become invested in their continuation. Generations of tech priests have dedicated their lives to preserving these secrets. Entire schools of thought within the Mechanicus are built around interpreting and defending these deceptions. Powerful individuals and factions have based their authority on their role as secret keepers. Changing course now would require admitting that all this effort was misguided, that generations of dedication served to perpetuate falsehoods rather than preserve truth. There's a psychological phenomenon where people who have sacrificed greatly for a belief become more committed to that belief, not less, because admitting error would mean admitting their sacrifices were wasted. The Mechanicus, as an organization, displays this phenomenon writ large. They've sacrificed too much in service to these lies to easily let them go. Moreover, the Mechanicus operates in an environment where revealing weakness is dangerous. The Imperium is beset by enemies on all sides. Chaos cults look for any sign of corruption or vulnerability to exploit. Xenos races probe for weaknesses in Imperial defenses. Internal factions within the Imperium itself compete for power and resources. In this environment, admitting that the Mechanicus has been wrong about fundamental matters would be seen as weakness, inviting challenges that the Mechanicus might not be able to withstand. The political calculations are equally dire. The Mechanicus's power rests on their monopoly of technical knowledge and their religious authority. Both would be undermined by revealing the full truth about their situation. Other Imperial institutions would see opportunity in Mechanicus' weakness, attempting to seize control of forge worlds, appropriate technologies, or establish their own technical expertise. The resulting power struggles could tear the Imperium apart when it can least afford internal conflict. There's also the question of whether revealing these truths would actually improve the situation. The Mechanicus could admit that much of their doctrine is built on deception, that their prohibition against innovation is arbitrary, that their religious beliefs are founded on unknowing worship of a Xenos entity. But would the result be a more rational, more effective approach to technology? Or would it be chaos, conflicting interpretations, and the disintegration of the only institution that successfully maintains the Imperium's technical infrastructure? The Mechanicus has convinced itself that the lies are necessary, that the truths they hide would cause more harm than good if revealed, that maintaining the deceptions is the lesser evil compared to the chaos that truth would bring. And perhaps they're right. Perhaps in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, where the Imperium totters on the edge of destruction, where every institution is corrupt and every truth is compromised, the Mechanicus's lies are actually one of the things holding civilization together. But perhaps they're wrong. Perhaps the stagnation caused by these lies, the innovations prevented, the knowledge suppressed, the questions left unasked, perhaps all of this has weakened humanity more than revealing the truth ever could. Perhaps if the Mechanicus had chosen honesty over deception 10,000 years ago, the Imperium would be stronger now, better equipped to face its challenges, more resilient in the face of threats. The tragedy is that there's no way to know. The Mechanicus cannot run the experiment of revealing everything and seeing what happens, because if that experiment fails, the result would be catastrophic and irreversible. So they continue as they have always done, maintaining the lies because the alternative is too frightening to contemplate, hiding the truth because they fear both its revelation and its suppression, trapped in a cage of their own making with no clear path to freedom. The lies continue because stopping them would require more courage than continuing them. because changing course would require more wisdom than staying the course, because revealing the truth would require more strength than maintaining the deception. The Mechanicus knows they're building on sand, but they keep building anyway, because the alternative is to admit that everything they've built might fall. Conclusion: the weight of 10,000 years of deception. In the deepest vaults of Mars, in chambers sealed by the Emperor's own hand, there exists a record of the Treaty of Olympus Mons, complete and unedited. This document, seen by perhaps a dozen individuals across 10,000 years, contains a single sentence that appears nowhere in any public version of the treaty. It reads, "Both parties acknowledge that the full truth of their nature and purposes must remain concealed from the wider Imperium, and that this mutual deception is the price of the alliance herein formed." This sentence captures the essence of the Mechanicus' relationship with truth. They are not guardians of knowledge, but guardians of secrets. They do not seek understanding, but rather control over understanding. They are the keepers not of wisdom, but of the boundaries around wisdom, deciding what can be known, by whom, and when. Every secret we've explored in this examination is connected to every other. The Void Dragon's influence on Mechanicus theology reinforces their prohibition against certain types of research. The prohibition against innovation justifies suppressing STC data. The suppression of STC data maintains their political leverage. Their political power allows them to continue practices like servitorization that might otherwise be challenged. The servitor creates the workforce necessary for their operations. Their operations maintain the infrastructure that makes them indispensable. Their indispensability protects them from consequences of their deceptions. It's a closed loop, self-reinforcing and self-perpetuating. Each lie supports every other lie. Each secret protects every other secret. The structure has achieved a kind of terrible stability where changing any single element would threaten the whole edifice. But this stability comes at a cost, measured in human potential unrealized, in innovations never pursued, in questions never asked. The Mechanicus' devotion to preserving ancient knowledge has become devotion to preventing new knowledge. Their quest to understand the Omnissiah has become a quest to avoid questioning what the Omnissiah actually is. Their service to humanity has become service to their own continuation, with humanity's benefit a secondary concern. The individual tech priest, laboring in the forges of some distant world, probably believes their work serves a noble purpose. They probably think they're recovering lost wisdom, maintaining sacred technologies, advancing humanity's understanding of the divine machine. They probably sleep well at night, secure in the righteousness of their cause and the purity of their faith. And they're able to maintain this belief only because they don't know what their superiors know, can't see what their organization hides, haven't learned the truths that would shatter their certainties. This is perhaps the greatest tragedy of the Mechanicus, that it transforms genuine devotion into unknowing complicity, that it takes the noblest impulses toward knowledge and service and corrupts them into maintaining a system built on deception. The tech priests who sacrifice their humanity to become one with the machine, who dedicate their lives to the quest for knowledge, who risk everything to recover ancient technologies. They're not villains or deceivers. They're victims and perpetrators simultaneously, trapped in a system that uses their sincerity to maintain its lies. The Mechanicus hides the truth because revealing it would be catastrophic. They maintain the lies because stopping would be disastrous. They continue the deceptions because changing course seems impossible. But in doing so, they've created a situation where humanity's technological salvation remains forever just out of reach, where the knowledge needed to save the Imperium exists but cannot be accessed, where the very organization tasked with advancing human understanding has become the greatest obstacle to that advancement. The Imperium faces existential threats from all sides. Chaos presses in from the warp, seeking to corrupt and destroy. Xenos races hunger for human worlds and resources. The structures of imperial civilization decay from within. unable to sustain themselves indefinitely. In this environment, humanity needs every advantage, every innovation, every breakthrough it can achieve. The Mechanicus possesses much of what humanity needs, locked in vaults, hidden in archives, suppressed by doctrine and enforced by religious prohibition. What would humanity be if the Mechanicus chose truth over deception, if they released the knowledge they've hoarded, if they allowed innovation instead of punishing it, if they admitted their uncertainties instead of hiding behind claims of divine authority? We cannot know, because that path was not chosen 10,000 years ago, and choosing it now might cause more harm than good. But we can know this: the Adeptus Mechanicus, for all their claims to seek knowledge, have become knowledge's jailers. For all their devotion to the Omnissiah, they serve power more than divinity. For all their supposed service to humanity, they've built a system that constrains and limits rather than liberates and empowers. The secrets of the Mechanicus are not mere curiosities or interesting lore details. They're the foundation of one of the Imperium's most crucial institutions, the hidden truths that shape how humanity approaches technology, innovation, and the very nature of knowledge itself. Understanding these secrets helps us understand why the Imperium stagnates, while xenospecies advance, why technology is treated as religion rather than science, why the future seems inevitably darker than the past. In the grim darkness of the far future, the Mechanicus keeps its secrets not from malice, but from fear. Fear that truth would destroy what lies have built. Fear that honesty would topple what deception maintains. Fear that revealing what they know would lose what they've gained. And so the lies continue, the secrets remain buried, and humanity stumbles forward through the darkness, guided by those who claim to see, but who have blinded themselves to avoid facing what they truly know. The red planet Mars spins on, its surface covered in forges that never sleep, its depths hiding truths that never surface. And beneath it all, in chambers that predate human civilization, something that might be a god or a prison or both continues its eternal sleep, dreaming dreams that shape reality in ways the sleepers above can barely comprehend and dare not acknowledge. The Mechanicus will continue hiding the truth, continue maintaining the lies, continue guarding the secrets that have defined them for 10 millennia. Because after 10,000 years of deception, they've forgotten how to do anything else. The lies have become the truth, the secrets have become the doctrine, and the keepers of knowledge have become the guardians of ignorance. And in the end, perhaps that is the greatest secret of all, that the Adeptus Mechanicus doesn't hide the truth from humanity. They hide from the truth themselves, because after 10,000 years of lying, they've lost the ability to distinguish what they know from what they believe, what they've discovered from what they've concealed, what they seek from what they fear. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this exploration of the Mechanicus's hidden truths, please like and subscribe for more deep dives into the lore of Warhammer 40K. The galaxy is vast, and the secrets it holds are deeper than any void. Until next time, may the Omnissiah, whatever it truly is, watch over you all.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.